Welcome back to the channel. I have another build video to share with you guys. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait, didn't you already do a Precious Scars video? I did, but this one is green, okay? Big difference. This build has an interesting mix of strand and solar verbs that will make you a walking, healing, suspending tank. Oh, and you could do funny things like this. Also, before I forget, I just realized, like, I think yesterday, that we passed 500 subscribers, so that's pretty freaking awesome. Thank you guys all for subscribing and liking all the recent videos, and I hope you enjoyed this one as well. As we've just mentioned, we are using Precious Scars. For those who are unfamiliar with this exotic, this Titan helmet grants you and nearby allies restoration for 3 seconds when you defeat an enemy with a weapon matching your subclass energy type. This is going to be our main source of healing for the build, much like the solar version beforehand. Since we are going green this time, we are using the Strand Titan subclass Berserker. Berserker allows us to support our teammates in a different way than Sunbreaker. The main focus of this build is to heal, suspend, and protect. Precious Scars brings the healing, and our first aspects allows us to apply the suspend. Drenger's Lash states, activate your class ability to create a ripple in reality that travels forward along the ground, suspending and damaging targets it hits. Suspending is how we will crowd control our rank and file enemies and even stun unstoppable champions. Earlier we mentioned protecting our allies. Into the Fray will do just that. This aspect states that destroying a tangle or casting your super grants Woven Mail for nearby allies. While you have Woven Mail, your melee regeneration is increased. Woven Mail is very strong. It provides 45% damage reduction to us and our allies for 10 seconds. In in-game content like Master Raids, Dungeons, and Grandmasters, this strand verb provides effective protection against virtually all sources of damage from enemies. Just to quickly go over our abilities, we're using a Rally Barricade, Frenzied Blade, and of course the Shackle Grenade for more suspension. Fragments will help keep the flow of the build going, starting with Thread of Generation, which grants us grenade energy for dealing damage. Shackle Grenade is one of our 2 options for suspending targets. Thread of Generation will increase our Shackle Grenade uptime. Thread of Isolation. Landing rapid precision hits emits a severing burst from the target. Sever is a valuable strand debuff when it comes to fighting tanky enemies because it lowers the target's damage output by 40%, another way that we can protect our fire team from the enemies. While Into the Fray does provide Woven Mail, Thread of Warding does it without having to defeat a strand debuff target. This fragment will increase our own Woven Mail uptime, as well as it will synergize with one of our armor mods later on. Speaking of synergy, for our last fragment we are using Thread of Evolution because this build also generates threadlings, so when we do generate those threadlings, they'll travel farther and they'll do increased damage. This season's artifact is why this build is as effective as it is. It allows for subclass synergy that wouldn't be possible otherwise, including some solar verbs as well. With that being said, there are a few artifact perks that make this build work really well together. Unraveling Orbs grants our strand weapons unraveling rounds when we pick up an Orb of Power. We are already using something that relies on picking up an Orb of Power, that being Thread of Warding, so this effect will also happen at the same time. Paired with our previous perk is Horde Shuttle. Horde Shuttle states that damaging unraveled targets occasionally spawns a threadling. After we unravel a target with our unraveling rounds, we now have a chance to create a threadling for damaging that same target. Thread of Evolution from earlier is also at play here, making those threadlings deal more damage and travel farther. Earlier I mentioned that we have some solar verbs in this build. This is possible by the following artifact perks, starting with Flint Striker, which states that rapid solar precision hits and rapid solar final blows grant Radiant. Even though we are not on a solar subclass, we also gain a roaming weapon damage buff equal to Well of Radiance. After we gain Radiant from Flint Striker, we also scorch targets with Kindling Trigger, which says that Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched combatants. Scorch is not the last solar verb either. We also are able to ignite enemies if we land a precision hit using Rays of Precision, which states that while Radiant, solar precision final blows cause combatants to ignite. So that means that on top of all the previous mentioned strand verbs, we're also gaining Restoration and Radiant as well. And we are scorching enemies and igniting them on top of those solar verbs that we mentioned too. To top this all off, we are also using Torch. Torch states that while Radiant, deal increased weapon damage to combatants affected by Strand and Stasis debuffs. If you remember from earlier, Thread of Isolation has the same requirement as Flint Striker, which states that we need to land rapid precision hits with a solar weapon. But for Thread of Isolation, it is any weapon, it doesn't have to be a strand weapon, so we are also applying Scorch while we're also severing the target. If you've seen any of my other build videos, nothing has really changed in this department. Prioritize tier 9 or 10 resilience, as well as tier 9 or 10 discipline, and throw the rest in strength, because this build doesn't really need recovery. As for our armor mod setup, you can quickly look right here. The only thing that I will highlight is that running Powerful Attraction really helps out this build, since we're using our Rally Barricade very often to both proc Drenger's Lash and permeability for our weapon. Normally I would recommend pairing this weapon with one particular exotic, but there is not a cut and dry answer like our other two build videos, though I do recommend using something if you have access to it. Parabellum takes the advantage of this build like no other weapon that I currently have access to. Since his SMG is solar intrinsically, we can proc Flint Striker, Torch, Kindling Trigger, and Race of Precision. Then, once we cast our Barricade, permeability will change the weapon energy type to Strand, meaning that we can now gain Unraveling rounds and make Threadlings thanks to Horde Shuttle. Attrition orbs on this particular SMG really benefits this build by granting us easy access to Orbs of Power to grant health, Unraveling rounds, and Woven Mail on every pickup. Now, if you don't have access to Parabellum, there are combinations that still work very well with this build. What you want to keep in mind is to find a solar weapon that can either defeat enemies quickly or land precision hits easily. Pair this with a Strand primary or special so you can take advantage of Precious Scars and activate Unraveling rounds. There are a lot of options to choose from. Find a Strand primary weapon or special that you like for ad clear and pair that with a solar precision weapon so you can proc Radiant as well. Now, I wanted to add a new section to our build videos, and that is how to use the build. The game plan of this build, as we mentioned, is to heal, suspend, and protect. The healing part of this build happens naturally. You defeat an enemy with a strand weapon and you gain restoration for yourself and your allies. If you land enough precision hits on that enemy with a solar weapon, you will gain Radiant, inflict Sever, and ignite the target. That enemy then explodes from the ignition, breaking the tangle that has been created as long as you're not on a cooldown, leaving behind a Woven Mail safety zone from into the fray. If you find yourself facing a wave of rank and file combatants, use your Shackle Grenade or Drenger's Lash Barricade to suspend the targets and collect any orbs that you generated nearby for Woven Mail and Unraveling rounds. Doing this will also proc permeability if you're holding a weapon with that perk. If it's time to deal damage to a champion, mini-boss, or boss, make sure that you land precision hits with a solar weapon to grant yourself Radiant while also severing the target, increasing your weapon damage output and decreasing their overall damage too. There you have it, the Strand Titan Precious Scars build. Let me know what you think of the build in the comments, leave a like if you enjoyed the build videos, and for the remainder of the video itself, you'll see how this build clears the Master Skydock 4 Lost sector. Thank you guys for watching, I'll see you next time.